Welcome, everybody, to the 29th formal debate of iDebates. It's certainly been a while since we had official one of these. Tonight, we are discussing with Unit and the Agrarian. Our topic is multiculturalism, or no, I'm sorry. Does multiculturalism inherently cause more harm than good? Arguing in the affirmative is the Agrarian, in the negative is Unit. Agrarian, whenever you're ready, we can start with your opening argument.
Okay. So basically when someone has a totally different culture from somewhere they've gained their culture from. Hold on. I'm getting my heart's kind of racing. Hold on. But this is kind of my first debate. I'm sorry guys, but when someone that has a drastically different culture go from their homeland, which they've assumed their cultural preference from, to relocate to a new society that has a drastically different culture, conflict naturally occurs since humans tend to have tribal tendencies. Cultures mixing tends to not end well in practice, and there are numerous cases of failure, like in Nigeria, in the Balkans in general, in India, suppression by the non-Chinese, like by the non-Chinese, by the you know, Tibetan people, the uh, more historical cases of failure of multiculturalism, like in Austria-Hungary. In North America, blacks, Hispanics in North America is represented by BLM. Basically, that whole movement is basically shown as a failure of multiculturalism. The only thing that I advocate is checked immigration so that cultural diversity worldwide is maintained. One has to suffer from oppressive institutions, and basically that. In theory, why does it fail? So, trying to introduce multiple cultures into one geographic area, like trying to introduce multiple other species, like animals, basically like that, and taking foreign species and trying to introduce them somewhere else, which doesn't really end well either. For example, what were they called? You guys heard of killer hornets? Yeah, basically that. And you know, there are also like I also have a problem with people thinking that there's any way to really mix cultures together through government institution, since actually government institution fails that inherently. If you look at like in North America, it's practically systemic, like built into the system, where disallow blacks basically from income mobility and being able to prosper in their own society. So why not fix this? Just totally separate them and allow those cultures and those people to prosper by themselves. That's it. Hopefully that was long
Okay.
enough.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and sorry
Uh,
for my stuttering. I'm kind of
oh
nervous.
no, it is totally fine, understandable. Thank you for anyway for participating in this. Um, Unit, are you ready to share your opening statement? You will also have
I
5 minutes.
am.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. We have already been introduced, but for formality's sake, I'm Unit. I'm a dedicated socialist and Orthodox Catholic aspirant. To determine if multiculturalism is inherently more beneficial than harmful, we have to analyze multiple different points. Specifically, the most important points to look at will be its recorded effects within modern sociology and its historical effects. Fundamentally, we see in nearly all modern studies on the matter, at least those that control for things like socioeconomic conditions, as in studies of actual quality rather than ones that look for a causal relationship and immediately assume that's a one that is actually about causation rather than sorry. They look for a correlation and immediately assume that's causation, right? It's just simply bad studies most of the time. We see on those studies that social cohesion does not decrease long term with increased diversity, those studies being the ones of quality that control for things like socioeconomic conditions. Rather, communities experience a slight short term drop with the introduction of new ethnic or cultural groups, and often only if the community is not very diverse in the first place. With later social cohesion increases past the original point. Multiculturalism helps societies rather than harming them. Now, my opponent has previously rejected the point of social cohesion, not under the incoherent idea that sociology as a field is invalid, but rather the even more incoherent idea that they were not historical analysis and as a result are not pertinent to his argument. To me, this seems extremely strange at best, but either way, I'll humor it. Historically, multicultural empires are prosperous. While many will point to their falls as evidence of their long term sustainability, I would ask why multiculturalism causes the fall of multicultural states, but monoculturalism does not cause the fall of monocultural states. Is there even such a thing as a monocultural state or society in the first place? There have been thousands of empires and states throughout history, and the ones we would have to point to as evidence against multiculturalism, unlike their not particularly diverse counterparts, often had long term zeniths, periods of absolute prosperity and golden ages that defined our modern world. The various United Arab Caliphates were not a singular cultural hegemony, but rather a mishmash of thousands, not thousands, but realistically dozens to hundreds of cultures at times. The Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the most historically prosperous states of the early modern period, the Chinese dynasties of old, the oldest contiguous civilization that actually still exists today, has been extremely multicultural. The Roman Empire was famously an extremely multicultural state. The Mongol Empire had what was referred to as the Pax Mongolica, a period of undefined, like unseen, at least in that part of the world, peace, prosperity, and increased trade. They are what allowed the Silk Road to grow. In fact, that's what allowed the spread of the bubonic plague was simply how peaceful and how easy it was to trade across Eurasia. Even in Africa with the Mali empires or the Abyssinian empires, in the Americas with the Incas, the Aztecs, and even various native federations that succeeded for a long period of time, often due largely to their multiculturalism. Their fall being usually the result of entirely independent factors, often European colonization. Even sometimes the factors which prompted the necessity of a multicultural state, such as in the case of the Iroquois Federation with American imperialism and encroachment. With the passing of time, our world only becomes more interconnected, more multicultural, and more prosperous. My opponent might say that the modern BLM movement and the backlash against it are examples of pitfalls of multiculturalism. Yet anybody who would point to these movements is painfully ignorant of the relative stability of the BLM movement and the reaction against it compared to past civil rights movement. The Klan isn't walking around the South lynching black people anymore. There are no more sundown towns. Slavery is dead in the ground and it has been for centuries. The world itself moves forward rather than backwards in the multiculturalism. It is nothing but the next step for our species. We see throughout history and throughout modern sociology, time and time again, criticism of multiculturalism is nothing but a scapegoat for those with cruel or false intentions.
You
Often
have
those
1 minute left here.
who are seeking to pit the working class against itself. Seeing this kind of rhetoric from somebody who would dare to call themselves not only a socialist but a fellow leftist is disgusting. It is a rejection of the spirit of internationalism inherent and necessary to the socialist struggle. And if it didn't make me so angry, I would feel nothing but disappointment in somebody who was likely at one point in time somebody I would call my ally. And with that, I see the rest of my albeit short time to the open dialogue.
Okay. Now, as I've explained to you both beforehand, normally we would be having rebuttals at this time, where each opponent could privately take apart each other's argument. But both have decided to skip rebuttals and go right into the 30-minute open dialogue. Um, After the open dialogue, which again will be 30 minutes, given 40 as long as you two wish to desire, um, we will have a questionnaire and closing arguments. The open dialogue will start right now.
Hey,
Okay. Okay.
so you referred to the Austro-Hungarian Empire as an example of why multiculturalism failed. How
Yeah.
exactly is that an example of the failure of multiculturalism when the fall of the Austrian Empire was prompted largely by the end of the single most total war humanity had known at that point? Wouldn't you
Wasn't
say
it
its relative
following?
stability for hundreds of years kind of a better example? I mean,
Wait,
hell, the
wasn't
Austro-Hungarian Empire itself, rather than the Austrian Empire, was a compromise for multiculturalism and contributed largely to its prosperity for a long period of time.
okay? So I'm pretty sure the Austrian-Hungarian Empire was like pretty unstable, like since its beginning.
Since its
So like,
beginning,
uh, since it, it's like not its beginning, but like towards the mid, kind of in the like middle period, or where's the late
middle
start,
period,
basically.
late start. So,
Yeah.
like, are you talking about the Austrian Empire, like
No,
when it
not the
began?
Austrian Empire, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire.
Austro-Hung So you mean the compromise that was made to seek further integration? Like, are you
Was-
aware that the aim of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and its last Kaiser was towards a multicultural federation that was extremely popular with the constituent ethnicities and only failed due to the, giant fucking war they lost?
Okay, hold on.
Were you aware?
No, I'm not aware of anything
You
you're saying.
weren't. So you weren't aware of the active attempt to make it a federal state
Because all the
rather than.
ethnicities within the Austro-Hungarian Empire are literally fighting for their independence, like since its inception.
Yeah, like the
And
Czechoslovak
before
Republic,
then, what am I talking
like
about?
like the like the I don't know, the proclamation of the Kingdom of Czechoslovakia, which was itself
Yes, and
multiculturalism.
Yugoslavia too. Like,
Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia were two states that came out
I'm
of
pretty
the
sure
fall of
it
the
was
Austrian
on
Empire.
like Yugoslavia was only held by like what's his name again? Tito.
Tito
Tito did
Tito
really well.
Tito wouldn't come to power until well after World War II. What? It was What are you
Oh, I'm
talking
talking
about?
about like after, like way before that, like after. But
It was
uh,
pretty well held together. Like, the Ustasha regime in Croatia required extreme German support because it was extremely unpopular. What are you talking about? It's why the Yugoslav partisan campaign was so strong. What? I don't get what this appeal is. Like, and why are you ignoring Czechoslovakia, which stayed together up until a very peaceful breakaway that was entirely unpopular, but neither one really just cared that much? Hello?
yeah. So Czechoslovakia, right? Um, to be honest, I don't
Right.
know about Czechoslovakia, but I know about the
So
Balkans,
you made an
and
appeal
they pretty
to
much.
history, like you appeal to the Austrian Empire as an
Unit
example of why it's
Ligurian.
wrong.
Okay, so basically, what I've researched basically is, you know, India, like with Muslims and Hindus, and China. Your example
Yeah.
of China was kind of wrong because I'm pretty sure they brutally oppressed and assimilated like basically everyone
Wait,
within the
no.
empire.
Honification is like actual intensive honification. I'm almost certain is a relatively modern thing.
Modern?
Modern, yes, modern. Honification, as in the assimilation of Chinese ethnicities into Han Chinese. Other than that, it kind of just naturally happened, right?
So basically, it naturally happened, like
Yeah,
assimilation.
like
So would that be
assimilation, but
multiculturalism?
yeah, because the Han Chinese that existed after the assimilation of various ethnicities into the Han Chinese are not the same Han Chinese that existed before that. Like, when cultures mix, they actually mix, right? It's not
Are
one
you talking
overtakes
about
the other.
ethnicities? No, I'm just talking about culture.
Yeah, I'm talking about
I
culture.
have no problem with immigration. You just have to
Oh,
assimilate into the culture. Like, don't go to Japan and be littering. Don't be,
what? Wait,
huh?
are you
They're
talking about
very
littering as like
cleanliness. Huh?
yeah, littering is generally frowned upon everywhere.
Oh, no, 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 no. Definitely not.
Re-
Like,
Leaving your
in
trash out isn't frowned upon everywhere.
oh, by government standards, yeah. But like, if you go to Japan, it's very clean.
Uh,
If you go to anywhere in like North America, it's not so much.
uh-huh,
There's
sure
garbage
thing.
everywhere.
Sure thing. Anyways,
At least relatively
you
clean.
mentioned one
Yeah.
second. You mentioned another state a minute ago, India. India is an amazing example of multiculturalism because it's one of the fastest growing and modernizing states. And do you really think an entire subcontinent with over 1 billion people in it has one dominant culture? Especially when before the arrival
Majority
of the
are Hindu.
British, India, yeah, Hindu, one religion. Like, okay, Poland is Catholic, France is Catholic. Poland and France are not the same culture. Like Shinto, like the religion that's most dominant in Japan, Shintoism, is a very related to Buddhism, but they're not Tibetans. India is an example of multiculturalism because India is like has a fuckload of ethnicities and different cultures in it. They're just majority Hindu.
Yeah, so they have a cultural identity behind a religion. So they're basically unified.
Yeah, you can have an
So would
overarching
you go to
national
India? So
you can
would you go
have an
to India?
overarching listen, you can have an overarching national identity while still being multicultural. A great example is the United States, right? There is an overarching American national identity, which is extremely easy to assimilate into, but there are still a very large variety of cultures, even within individual cities, not just looking at the entire nation.
Okay, so what I was trying to say was, let's say I'm an immigrant and I
Uh-huh.
go to India, I
Mhm.
eat cows. I just eat beef, right?
Okay.
Should Indian people accept that? Yes or no?
I mean, are you Hindu?
Reminding you that India is majority Hindu.
Okay. There are religions in India which are treated relatively peacefully that aren't Hindu. There's actually a decent sized population of Christians in the South. And yeah, they eat beef, man. They're fine. They're cool. They're
They're
great
fine and
even.
they're cool.
Yeah. They're not like
Oh,
being
cause like
bombed.
I've well
And wait,
not
what's this
bombed.
like weird like, oh, you should assimilate into any culture you come into contact. Like you should fully assimilate. Do you think we should like if you go somewhere and you
Oh,
assimilate into
like
their
it's
culture?
basically like the analogy of my house, right? If you want to come in, you respect my rules and regulations. That's pretty much it.
A
Like I don't
house
care if you
is
come
not
in
a
my house, but
nation.
like you just have to.
A house is not a nation. Like, yeah, take your shoes off at my door, man, but I'm not gonna
No,
say you have to be
I'm not
Christian.
saying a house is like a nation, but it's an analogy.
Yeah, it's a shitty analogy
Oh,
because they're two entirely separate things. They aren't related to each other at all, really. You're making like what's this weird like, oh, you need to respect the rules. Yeah, like generally respecting the social contract of a nation you immigrate to is it's a good idea, but that doesn't mean you have to fully
okay, that
assimilate.
so we agree.
Yeah,
We
but that's
agree
not full
basically.
assimilation, and that's not a rejection of multiculturalism. Like, you seem to be making the assumption before even debating it that, like, multiculturalism invariably results in people disrespecting others when there's no like, what can you prove that?
Wait, say that again. I didn't make.
Do you think multiculturalism inherently like, is a part of multiculturalism will always be one or two groups respecting another, not disrespecting another? 'Cause, like, you're talking about respecting their rules. Yeah, respect the general social contract, right? But that doesn't mean full assimilation and abandoning your culture. Do you
Okay,
think,
so
like, different ethnicities and cultures can't respectfully live with each other?
well, if a like it's just generally as you know.
Do you? Yes or no? It's a
It's
pretty simple question.
like yeah, you can, but it's
So it's not inherent?
basically my main message is like respect the rules, right? Okay, we
That's not
already
your main
said that.
message. That's not your main
Unit,
message. That's not the thing that
unit,
you're arguing for.
leg
Yeah.
variant speak.
Okay, so basically, just respect the rules. If you have something that the culture doesn't disagree with, and sure, like let's say you bring, you know, food, some type of your like original food from your homeland or whatever, and you come and bring it here. You know, is that multiculturalism? Like
Yes.
say it?
Yes, that's multiculturalism because cuisine is a huge part of culture. And exposing one culture to elements of another culture is, yeah, multiculturalism.
Yeah, but you're not taking the aggregate of the culture. Like I'm just saying,
Aggregate? What?
if there's something, if there's okay, let's take for instance, Muslim nation, okay?
Yeah.
They have cuisine, right?
Yeah, they
If
have
they
different
want to
food.
bring that here, sure, whatever. But
Muslim isn't like Muslim isn't like a culture. It's an element of culture, sure, right? Like a lot of different Muslim nations are
it's an
going to have
element.
largely halal cuisine, but it does differ.
If you were to have like immigration, just take in whatever isn't opposed to the native culture.
Yeah. What about it?
But like if you're a Muslim, right? For example, and you came to another nation per se, uh, and then you just completely disrespected women, that would not be fine.
Wait,
Like if the
what?
native culture wasn't fine with that.
Do you think like it's an inherent part of Islam to disrespect women? That really shows more than anything just like ignorance on your part. It's like another comment you made a while back, not in the context of this debate, but I'm assuming your position hasn't changed in the last couple of days, where you said like, "Oh, have you seen whites and blacks and Asians living together?" Like, my guy, have you just
So
been
like
not
I literally
exposed to other
haven't.
cultures?
I'm pretty
Well,
I'm pretty sure zoning has completely
well,
depleted that.
I'll tell you right now, I live in LA. I most certainly have seen different ethnicities and cultures living together in complete harmony. You know, school I went to had Salvadorians and Mexicans there. And if you didn't know, those two, back in their home countries, there's a bit of feud there sometimes, right? You call a Salvi a Mexican, they're gonna get real pissed. They live together in perfect harmony. They were making like jokes with each other about it all the time. It was hilarious. I loved, watching that. I've seen different ethnicities and different cultures living together in perfect harmony time and time again. Just because you haven't doesn't disprove it. It just means you're ignorant and haven't experienced much. Maybe you need to leave your bumfuck town in Quebec. I don't know.
I'm not from Quebec, but all right. But
I don't know where the fuck you're from.
yeah, I'm
Unit, try to avoid.
literally
Yeah, sure thing.
okay. So zoning, like in North America, has completely separated, uh, ethnicities and cultures on aggregate. I don't know about your personal experience, but that's kind of what happened since rental prices are since ethnic disparities in income have you know put them in like places where they're kind of separated like, to places where they can afford, but it's kind of linked with income. So,
Yeah, because what? Like, yeah, minorities get abused usually by conservative governments who are against multiculturalism. Being against multiculturalism, saying like multiculturalism will cause like a bunch of criminals to come to our country, and then when all those immigrants come to your country, you like rapidly suppress them. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah, but like, how do we change that? You fundamentally can't because it's ingrained with the system.
we
That's
fundamentally
like
can't.
reformist, like that's
Wait,
kind of reformist, which I
are
kind of disagree
do you
with.
think
Like,
people are
imagine
do you
calling,
think people are inherently going to, like, segregate themselves and, like, minorities are always gonna get abused?
yes,
So, like, different ethnicities should have their own nations and stuff then?
it should be homogeneous, like
So you're an
culturally.
ethno-nationalist.
I'm not an ethno-nationalist person.
But you think
Like, I'm
different
not.
ethnicities should have, like, their own homogeneous states or at least homogeneous autonomous zones?
Unit, I asked again,
I mean,
let
if at
agrarian
least,
finish their sentences.
I am.
I mean, I could see how that would like kind of help since a lot of people have been, affected by government, like blacks, Hispanics, indigenous people, right? So if you were to have ethnic, ethno states per se, and they're like able to control their own economic conditions, be able to have, some kind of credit union, mutual bank, whatever. Like they have in what's that state, North Dakota. They kind of have a bank there. Uh, gives out like credit like pretty easily to, and it focuses on community. But if we just all had that per se on an ethnic level in North America to have with societal uh issues, I think that would work. But like I'm not ethno nationalist per se. I just want cultural like homogeneity.
You want cultural homogeneity.
Yes.
And would you say in America, a lot of the cultural differences are ethnic differences?
Well, kind yes, but it's
Mm.
not by itself. Like, because are like at least in the white population, are very differing, cultures.
So, do you think things would be better and more stable if generally we had ethno-states?
As a temporary measure, probably in the long run, no, because you have to deal with, if a black person loves a white person, what if a Hispanic person loves a indigenous person, all that.
But that's
At least in the short
multiculturalism.
run, probably.
That's multiculturalism.
It's not necessarily multiculturalism because I'm just talking about ethnicities.
Okay.
Ethnicity is rigid. Your
So,
culture can change.
are you going do you think, like, ethnicity and culture aren't strongly correlated? And that interethnic, uh, like, diffusion into each other? Like, if 2 ethnicities kind of mesh, that's not going to cause 2 cultures to mess? Because I promise you, it will.
Well, okay, so
10 minutes
if,
left in debate.
wait, hold on, my
Take your time. If you're
okay,
having
okay,
a
okay,
technical,
yeah, okay. It just decided, but I think culture is kind of different, tends to be more different, like in you know, ethnicity, but it's not always the case since culture is, it's not rigid, it can change.
That doesn't really answer my question. I was more
Wait, what
asking
did
if
you
you
say?
I asked you if you think, like, diffusion of 2 ethnicities into each other is not going to cause diffusion of 2 cultures into each other.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Have you literally ever seen an example where that didn't happen? Because I cannot see how 2 ethnicities, like, diffusing into each other in any world does not cause 2 cultures to also diffuse into each other. Seeing as how ethnicity and culture are strongly correlated, especially in America. Well, actually, especially everywhere.
Well, yes, but you know, as I said, culture is not rigid.
Oh, culture isn't rigid. Okay, culture isn't rigid, so culture can change.
Yes.
Can two cultures diffuse into each other to make a new culture?
Well, it tends to be like
I
what
didn't
is
ask about
like the
tend.
culture itself. What is the culture itself, and what are
What
the
does that mean?
similarities? What are the differences?
That doesn't answer my question at all, actually. Would you like to take another go?
And what was your question?
Can two cultures mesh and diffuse into each other to create a new culture?
Can two ethnicities like mesh together basically to
No.
create?
Can two cultures mesh or diffuse into each other to create
Oh,
a new culture?
no, because
But I thought
uh,
culture wasn't rigid.
like if you want to like keep your culture, but there's two extremes. Like there's a difference between two cultures meshing and then just entirely assimilating.
It's not assimilation, it's a new culture. Can that happen? You said no. I said, but I thought culture
There's
wasn't
either
rigid.
going to be
So
tension
either pick.
or assimilation.
Can cultures mesh, diffuse, and create new cultures, or is culture not rigid? There's like culture rigid. You got to pick, right? Culture is either rigid or that thing can happen.
But you're saying culture mixing
Yes,
to create a
because
new culture.
things that are fluid, right? Like culture, that isn't rigid. You said it's fluid, right? It can change. It can change, right? Like it changes with environmental factors. It changes with exposure to new things, and it changes just based on everything. Everything affects culture. You generally agree with that, right?
Yes, but like what I mean is like, oh, if you have a cultural group and another cultural group and they come together, let's say there's either going to be tension, war, or whatever, or one group is going to assimilate to the other group,
Can you prove that?
like, or like assimilation and,
Also,
war and
again,
stuff.
this by the way, again,
I already
this implies
gave,
culture is rigid. This implies culture is rigid because either one culture entirely overtakes the other with no changes, ergo not a new culture, or neither culture changes and they just kind of rub up against each other, creating tension, right? So is culture rigid or not?
like, what I meant by rigid is like, you cannot change it at all. And, it's, you can change culture, but like, just not mesh it per se. That's what I meant by like you can change culture.
What the hell does
Not
that
like
mean?
specifically mesh it, but like assimilate entirely.
So culture doesn't change, right? Is that what you're saying?
You can change your culture from like your previous to one that you assimilate to
But cultures themselves do not change. Is that what you're saying?
themselves. Yes.
Say it again.
Themselves. Yes.
What are you saying? Like yes or no?
I said themselves. Yes.
Themselves, yes, cultures can't change. So
A person can change like cultures, but
so if
like culture.
so So you do want ethnostates. Because that means culture is rigid. That like on a cultural level, societal level, cultures can't mesh is what you're saying. And so you do want an ethnostate. You're an ethnat.
No, I'm not. What are you talking about?
You
I'm
like have
saying,
these two you have contradictory positions. You're like, "Oh, I'm not an ethnat, but I have all the constituent parts of an ethnat." And the logical conclusion of my stance leads to ethno-nationalism. You gotta pick one. Are you an ethno-nationalist
I'm not
or
an
not?
ethno-nationalist.
Then how can you think that culture, which is entirely rigid, they can't change?
A person can change cultures, but cultures themselves cannot mesh.
That's I
So,
know. I'm saying on a societal level, on a
so
cultural
how would I
level.
want ethnostates?
My brother in Christ, can you not acknowledge that culture often follows ethnic lines? Because when cultures change, it takes a really long time. Like you split a culture in half, right? You take one cultural group, you put it somewhere, you pick another cultural group, you put them somewhere else. Eventually, the cultures are going to diverge in different ways, right?
Oh, sorry, I was reading chat. Say that again.
Jesus fucking Christ. Just don't read the chat. Just pay attention to us.
Okay, say
So
what you're saying again.
you take two groups. Let's use a historical example. Let's take the Germanic tribes during the antiquity, right? During the Roman era. You take the Franks and you take like another group of the Franks, right? And you send them both in different directions. No, the Goths. That's the best idea. The Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. You take one Goth group somewhere. You take the other Goth group somewhere else. You take one to Spain. You take the other to Italy, right? Historically, those two cultures they diverge, right? One becomes the Visigoths and one becomes the Ostrogoths because that's what happened. They're also going to change on an ethnic level, right? That's just kind of how ethnicities form. That's how cultures form. How they become independent of each other is by becoming, separating from one another and staying separate long enough that they diverge in different ways, right?
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to say, can the audience please refrain from tagging or pinging the participants until the questionnaire? Thank you.
Right. That's how it happened historically. That's how this happens historically, right? It's how the Tatars did it, right? It's how the Goths did it. It's how all these nomadic groups did it. What happened to the Romans? You would agree with that generally, right?
Okay.
Like ethnicities and cultures form along the same boundaries. And so
Okay.
generally, ethnicity and culture are going to be strongly correlated.
Okay.
And if cultures on a societal level can't mess, you need a homogenous cultural state to be truly stable, right?
Mhm.
You would also need, in most cases, a homogenous ethnic state to be stable, right?
Okay.
You agree with this?
Hmm. This is a point where I label myself as an ethno-nationalist or not. So
Understood. You aren't a leftist, you're a fucking Nazi.
I'm a Nazi. I
Because
Yeah.
never.
you consider yourself a socialist but want a
Um,
nation state along ethnic lines. How can you consider yourself a leftist and still be an ethno-nationalist, self-admitted ethno-nationalist? Do you not know the immediate evil of ethno-nationalism, the horrors it has caused over time?
well, okay. So,
I want
yes.
to
Well,
say,
yes. Well, yes.
Yes.
Like Hitler and stuff. But like,
Do you not
I
acknowledge
would
that he's
not
an ethno-nationalist?
advocate what like Hitler did. Of course.
Of course you're not,
No.
because you're like every other fucking ethno-nationalist. You say this shit, you say, "Oh, I don't
if
advocate I don't
okay,
advocate war. I don't advocate war," until you take it to the logical extreme. Do you think states don't compete with one another? If you're forming states along ethnic lines, eventually those ethnicities and those states are going to compete with each other. Then you've got two entirely competing ethnicities. again, along state boundaries. What do you think's gonna happen when one wins? Do you think everybody's gonna go back home and be happy-go-lucky? They're all gonna have these super stable states, and they're all gonna be super nice to each other, and there's not gonna be any fighting ever again.
Oh no, but there are provisions. Right.
What provisions?
Like there have been provision, like, it's not a I haven't really read Marx that much. Uh
Mhm.
he said something about like most wars are guided by like material conditions or something of the sort.
Yes,
Or
he
some people provide like free trade as a way to, stop wars, and democracy as well, which is what I
Yeah, he
advocate.
also said that class conflict is the single largest conflict and the only thing preventing humanity from uniting against, the bourgeois, like preventing all proletarians from uniting against the bourgeois is the bourgeois pushing notions of multiculturalism being bad for you and trying to pit the working class against each other on ethnic boundaries. Have you read the manifesto? I haven't read that much Marx. Have you read any Marx? Was it just the Spark Notes?
Yeah, just like notes and stuff. That's it.
Mhm. Do you not see the issue here? You've admitted to me you're an ethnat, dude. I figured most leftists, rather than biting down on that bullet, would say, "You know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there
Nah,
was an
nah, nah, nah.
issue. Maybe my logic is inherently flawed because I am now on a similar ideological platform to actual fucking fascists." Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not some Marx elitist, right? You don't have to read Marx. You don't have to read Theory to be an effective socialist. Right? You can just read the Spark Notes as long as you supplement that with actual praxis, with actual sound reasoning and logic, and being able to discuss with other leftists and other socialists, right? Without having this intense need to die on a hill so hard you call yourself an ethno-nationalist when you are against multiculturalism. Rather, you can simply admit you were wrong. You know you can do that, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
capable of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
I would like just interject here real quick. We have an additional 10 minutes left on the clock. Just to clarify a few points here. Agrarian, are you confirming that you are some type of ethno nationalist? Just to
no, no,
clear
no,
up.
no, no, no. I agree with Unit.
Okay,
Makes
okay.
a lot of
So
sense.
you're capitulating.
Hold on. I just want to clear up things for the audience sake. In addition to that, let's just try to stay more on the topic of specifically the multiculturalism ethnicity issue rather than going to Marx and what defines a leftist and all that. Just try to stay
Under-
a little bit more on topic.
Understood.
Continue.
Fundamentally, I'm trying to take him to the extreme. Make sure he
Understood.
realizes the logical outcome of his argument.
Yep.
So
10
would
minutes.
you so would you say you consider yourself to have been wrong?
I said, well, yeah, I said, yeah.
Yeah. So is that like a you're abandoning the point? You're saying like you
Yeah,
no longer are
I'm a
arguing in the affirmative?
full-fledged multiculturalist right now. Yeah.
Berry
Okay.
based. Debate
Okay.
over.
Hopefully that was good enough content.
The debate that I'm yeah, we're still
Still,
going. Um,
how much time left?
8 minutes in the opening discussion. Do you have
I don't
anything else
think
you'd like
there
to
are
clarify?
really.
So you were
Oh,
done.
I'm good.
Grant, is there anything else you'd like to address towards unit?
No, like I
Okay.
agree with him. So like, uh,
All right. So in
we
that case,
just
then we have 10-minute closing argument or 5-minute closing arguments, whatever. You just what you're walking away with here, your final statements. Unit, would you care to go first? 5 minutes on the clock, starting now.
Well, that was nice. I was glad I was able to get through to the agrarian. That was fun. I think I articulated why I generally disagree with the notion that multiculturalism is bad, especially in a conversation between two leftists. I think I articulated that pretty well. I don't really have anything to give for the closing because, this debate kind of ended impromptu with me being declared righteous winner. Wow, that felt bad.
Bit pompous.
Yeah, a bit much.
Okay. So is that it? No more.
Yeah, I'm
Nothing
good.
else for Thursday.
I ain't got nothing else.
Okay, so
Okay.
what I want to
Go. Sorry. Starting the timer for you right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I completely agree with Unit now. My position was pretty horrible. Please don't roast me in chat. This was my first debate, please. Yeah. I agree with Unit. I'm a multiculturalist, everything. And I really like the debate. He was very articulate, like he said himself. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I would just like to thank everyone for coming here, and yeah.
Okay. In that case, if you're both done with your closing argument, we will. I'm now opening up the chat for questions. If anyone would like to join the voice chat and speak, just say so in the chat.
I get priority. I don't care.
Who are you?
Okay, my name is Queen Esther. Hi. I just wanted to say, Unit, you did a good job, but the Agrarian, I don't want you to feel bad. I don't want you to feel like ashamed or anything. I think you did a really good job for your first time, and you're probably one of the very few people who were admitting and willing to change their minds in the middle of the debate and,
I like to change my
concede.
mind.
Yeah, and
don't like-
concede to the other person. So I just wanted to say you did a really good job. I don't want you to feel ashamed of yourself, but I'm really glad that you both came to do this, and I just wanted to say, Raven, you did a good job moderating. That is all.
Why, thank you, random stranger, who I don't know who you are.
Oh yeah, sure. Kind moderator.
Okay, so like I said, if anybody has any questions, just say so in the chat, and I will invite you to speak.
Randy's gonna be mean.
So I'm avoiding Randy.
He's gonna roast my ass.
No, not you.
Oh God, Maximus. Okay, Randy, would you care to speak? I hit invite to speak. I don't know. Invite to speak? It does not give me the option to unmute him. Randy, are you muted?
Oh, okay. I think it's working now. Can you hear
Idiot.
me?
I mean,
Okay, kind of piggybacking off of what Esther said. Like, this was great. Agrarian, that was fucking embarrassing. Like, it really just
Yeah,
fucking
like
sucked.
they're gonna post this too. That's tough. That's okay.
Sir muted. She's about to cry. You made Esther cry, Randy. You should kill yourself.
that's my. Did Maximus request to speak and he's not even in here? Oh, there you are. Maximus, are you going to speak? Maximus, are you going to speak?
No, I don't think he will.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so that's it.
Yeah, that'll be it. No questionnaire probably because no big questionnaire.
But that was it
Usually we
was long
do.
enough, right?
Yeah.
I think,
Usually
yeah.
we usually do have a questionnaire, but that's usually when one person doesn't entirely.
All right. I'd like to say, thank everybody for coming tonight. Thank our lovely audience. Thank our participants. Unit Grain, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That is it, I believe. If anyone would like to join in on any further debates, please look up our Discord server at iDebates, lowercase I, capital D, as in D's nuts. Thank you, and have a good night.